when 18-year-old Tyler Brennan stormed up to the front of the classroom, shoved a pile of books off the new teacher's desk, and sneered, "Weak little substitute," the entire room erupted in laughter. For the past 2 years, no teacher had survived more than 6 weeks under Tyler's reign of chaos at Lincoln Alternative Academy. His father's seat on the city council made him untouchable. His size made him intimidating. And his loyal crew made him feel unstoppable. But what Tyler didn't realize was that the quiet woman standing at the front of the class wasn't just another timid stand-in. She'd spent the last 8 years grinding through the brutal training gyms of Detroit, mastering Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Beneath her modest blazer were arms built to choke out opponents twice her size. And in less than 60 seconds, Tyler Brennan would go from being Lincoln's most feared bully to lying unconscious on the classroom floor in front of 20 stunned students, each one capturing the moment on their phones. That day, he became a viral warning, proof of what happens when entitlement meets its match. For every teacher who's ever been bullied by a student with too much power and too little respect, this was justice, swift and unforgettable. Have you ever seen someone get exactly what they deserved? Share your story in the comments, because sometimes, karma shows up wearing a blazer and a ponytail. Councilman Robert Brennan, a major donor to the school board, had made sure his son Tyler knew exactly how untouchable he was. And Tyler used that power like a weapon, targeting anyone he considered weak. By his side were Jake Morrison and Mason Reeves, his ever-loyal enforcers. Jake, broad-shouldered and brutish, with the smirk of a schoolyard warlord. Mason, wiry and twitchy, always looking for the next bit of chaos to spark. Together, the three of them ruled Lincoln Alternative Academy through fear, turning every hallway into their territory. Cassie took it all in silently, studying the space that would be her new classroom. It was cold and institutional. Fluorescent lights buzzed above desks scarred by years of bored hands and boiling tempers. But Cassie had taught summer school in buildings with gang graffiti on the walls and no AC in July. Compared to that, this place had working heat. That was a win. What Principal Hayes didn't know was that Cassie Blake wasn't just some fresh-faced idealist. She'd been training in mixed martial arts since the day her freshman year of college took a dark turn, a brutal mugging that left her hospitalized and shattered. She'd walked into Warriors Den MMA in Detroit a month later, barely able to meet her own gaze in the mirror. And from that moment on, she never looked back. 8 years of Brazilian jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai, and wrestling forged her into someone unrecognizable from that hospital bed girl. Her mentor, Marcus "Tank" Williams, a retired UFC fighter, had taught her more than just how to fight. He taught her how to stay calm in the chaos. That every hold, every strike, every takedown was about solving problems under pressure. Violence is a language, Tank always said. But it should be your last sentence, not your opening line. The goal isn't to win fights. It's to end them, before they even start. Cassie earned her black belt 2 years ago in a quiet ceremony that felt more powerful than her college graduation. She didn't brag. Didn't post sparring clips. She'd rather be underestimated than feared. And today, that decision might prove more valuable than any lesson plan. On the first day of class, the tension hung thick, like a storm on the edge of breaking. Students shuffled into classroom B12 with guarded eyes and tired shoulders, scanning for threats, allies, and escape routes. Then the storm walked in. Tyler Brennan strode through the doorway like he owned the school. Standing 6'2" and dripping with smug confidence, his designer clothes and perfectly styled hair screamed privilege. But it was his eyes, ice blue and empty, that told the real story. This was a boy who'd never been told no, and made sure no one else dared say it. Jake and Mason flanked him like bodyguards, already cracking jokes loud enough for everyone to hear. Instantly, the trio claimed the back corner like it was their throne room. Other students peeled away, forming a safe perimeter. The message was clear. Tyler ran this room. Cassie watched the scene unfold as she straightened her papers and powered on the smartboard. She'd seen this dance before, alpha wolves marking territory with arrogance instead of fangs. In nature, dominance displays were often a way to avoid conflict. In high school, they were just the opening act to something much darker. Cassie cleared her throat and faced the room. "All right," she said calmly. Let's get started. Cassie spoke, her voice clear and commanding, sharp enough to slice through the rising chatter. I'm Miss Blake. I'll be your English teacher for the rest of the semester. I know this class has seen a lot of changes lately, but I'm here to stay. Tyler's laughter cut straight through her introduction like a blade. That's what they all say, he called out, not even pretending to whisper. Give it 2 weeks. This place chews up teachers and spits them out. A few students glanced nervously between the two. Some shifted in their seats. Others leaned in, sensing the moment. This wasn't just an interruption. This was the test, the moment that would decide if Miss Blake survived Lincoln, or became its next casualty. Cassie didn't flinch. She met Tyler's eyes, calm and unblinking. I appreciate your concern for my job security, Tyler, she said, her tone steady. But I've taught in tougher places than this. So instead of betting on when I'll leave, why don't we focus on what you're going to learn while I'm here? Jake Morrison let out a scoffing laugh, cracking his shoulders to make his Letterman jacket stretch with the effort. Lady, you look like you just walked out of suburbia. What do you even know about tough? The challenge lingered in the air, bold and deliberate. Cassie could feel the entire classroom go still. The tension was a physical thing now, something heavy pressing against the walls. This was it. The defining moment. Not just of the day, but of her entire shot at making it in Lincoln. And she met it head-on. I know that tough isn't about making noise or bullying people smaller than you, she replied smoothly. Tough is facing your problems instead of hiding behind them. Tough is showing up when things get hard, without blaming the world. And tough is earning respect, not demanding it through fear. Tyler's expression darkened. He wasn't used to teachers pushing back, especially not women. Especially not women who looked more suited for latte art than a confrontation in a classroom full of rejects. Normally, a few veiled threats or a raised voice was all it took to re-establish his rule. Most staff folded the second he stood up. So Tyler stood. All 6'2" of him. He rose slowly, deliberately, casting a long shadow over the room. His voice dropped low, calculated to intimidate. Respect, he said. You haven't earned anything yet, Miss Blake. You're just another substitute with some savior complex, thinking you'll be the one to fix us. Behind him, Mason stood too, fidgeting like a live wire ready to snap. His voice carried a smirk you could hear even without seeing his face. Yeah, we've seen your type before. All talk, no guts. When it gets real, you'll run like the rest. Cassie didn't move, didn't blink. Her breathing stayed even, her muscles loose. Years of sparring had taught her to watch the little things. The tightening of a jaw, the slight weight shift in a foot, the way a hand twitches just before it becomes a fist. Tyler and his crew weren't preparing for a real fight. Not yet. They were posturing, wolves baring their teeth, expecting her to run like the others. Cassie stayed still, her presence calm and unshaken. I understand you're testing me, she said, her voice unwavering. That's normal, especially if adults have let you down before. She took a step forward, not aggressive, but grounded, firm. But here's how this works. You have 2 choices. 1, you sit down, and we move forward with class. Or 2, you keep pushing, and find out exactly what happens when someone stops being afraid of you. Several phones were now discreetly pointed toward the front of the room, their lenses catching every second. At Lincoln Academy, this kind of drama was rare and prized, better than the usual hallway fights or parking lot drug busts. Tyler smiled, but the expression never touched his eyes. Are you threatening us, Miss Blake? He asked, his voice syrupy with false concern. Because that would be very unprofessional. My father might have a few concerns about teachers who can't maintain healthy boundaries with students. It was a move Cassie recognized instantly, the veiled threat wrapped in performative politeness. A political landmine, primed to detonate. He'd used it before, weaponizing his father's influence to dodge consequences, while painting himself as a misunderstood victim. Cassie gave a slow, deliberate nod. You're absolutely right, Tyler. Threats would be unprofessional. She let the silence hang just long enough. That's why I'm not making one. I'm making a promise. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. As long as you're in my classroom, you'll treat yourself and everyone else in here with respect. If you can't do that, well, then we'll have a different kind of conversation. Jake cracked his knuckles loudly, puffing up his chest like a movie thug. What kind of conversation? You gonna call our parents? Send us to the principal? We've heard it all before, lady. Before Cassie could respond, Tyler lifted a hand, cutting Jake off. He was watching her now, not just reacting, but analyzing, like a predator realizing the prey isn't afraid. Something wasn't lining up. The way she stood. The way her tone never wavered. She wasn't flinching. She wasn't afraid. And that unsettled him. You know what, Miss Blake? He said, voice shifting into something eerily polite. I like you. You've got more backbone than the last few. But here's the thing, backbone only gets you so far, when you're in over your head. He began walking toward the front of the class, slow and deliberate. Every step echoed through the silent room like a countdown. The other students shrank back, clearing a path, their eyes flicking nervously between the two. They'd seen this movie before. The moment where the teacher folds. Where Tyler reclaims his throne. You see, Tyler continued, now close enough that Cassie had to tilt her chin up to meet his eyes. This isn't a normal school. These aren't normal kids. We're here because the system couldn't handle us. He smiled again, cold, triumphant. And if the system couldn't handle us, what makes you think one little substitute teacher can? Cassie didn't move. Her hands stayed relaxed at her sides, though every instinct screamed for her to shift her weight, prepare her stance. But she stayed rooted, calm, present. Tyler was close enough now that she could smell his designer cologne, sharp and synthetic. His eyes sparkled with cruel amusement. This was his show, his moment. The psychological chess match he always won. Cassie spoke softly. I think you're right about one thing, she said. This isn't a normal school. She leaned in slightly, not threatening, just steady. But you're wrong about something else. Her voice was barely above a whisper now, but somehow it cut deeper than a shout. I'm not here to handle you, Tyler. I'm here to teach you. There's a difference. Tyler laughed, loud, dismissive, barking with contempt. Teach me. Lady, the only thing you're going to teach me is how fast a teacher quits when it gets uncomfortable. He reached forward, slow and deliberate. His hand moved toward her desk, toward the stack of neatly arranged papers, fingers curled to scatter them like confetti. A power move. A message, you don't control this space. I do. But Tyler never made it. Cassie's hand moved, fast and fluid. Before his fingers touched the papers, her hand snapped forward and caught his wrist with surgical precision. It looked almost gentle, barely forceful at all. But Tyler's body went rigid. Her fingers had found the pressure point just below the base of his thumb. What looked like a calm grip felt like a clamp made of steel. To everyone watching, it seemed like she'd merely stopped him. To Tyler, it was something else entirely. It was control. Total, unmistakable control. And for the first time, the fear in the room wasn't coming from the students. I asked you to return to your seat, Cassie said, her tone still calm, but now laced with unmistakable authority. This is me asking nicely. Tyler tried to yank his hand back, and couldn't. Cassie's grip didn't hurt, but it was immovable. Not the strength of brute force, but of precision. Her fingers pressed into pressure points with uncanny accuracy, neutralizing his strength without leaving a mark. For the first time in his life, Tyler Brennan, untouchable, arrogant, feared, was physically held in place by someone he dismissed as weak. Let go of me, he hissed, panic flickering behind his forced composure. You can't put your hands on students. That's assault. Cassie's smile was faint but sharp, like the edge of a scalpel. "This is a control technique," she said. "It's designed to prevent violence, without causing harm. Learned it in self-defense training." Her gaze held his. "Would you like me to demonstrate the difference between this and actual force?" The question wasn't loud, but it cut through the room like a razor. A challenge. A warning. Jake and Mason had risen from their seats now, caught in the crosshairs of uncertainty. Their leader, the apex predator of Lincoln Academy, was being handled. Phones were up. Cameras recording. Dozens of lenses watched, breath held, as the power dynamics shifted right before their eyes. Tyler's face cycled through emotions, first disbelief, then rage, then the creeping edge of something he didn't recognize until now. Fear. No teacher had ever pushed back. Not like this. Not calmly. Not without blinking. "You're making a mistake," Tyler said through gritted teeth. "My father will bury you for this. You have no idea who you're messing with." Cassie didn't flinch. "I know exactly who I'm dealing with." Her voice lowered, steady and intimate. "But your father isn't here. This is between you and me. And right now, you have a choice." She didn't raise her voice, didn't lean in. She didn't have to. "You can keep escalating and find out exactly how much control I have, or you can sit down and let me teach this class." The entire interaction had taken less than 30 seconds. But something foundational had shifted in that short span. Something every student in the room could feel. The untouchable boy had been touched, controlled, stopped. Jake took a step forward, his wrestler's instincts firing. "Hey, let him go, right now, or we've got a problem." Cassie's eyes flicked to Jake, cool and measured. "We already have a problem, Jake," she said evenly. "The only question is whether you want to make it worse or better." Still holding Tyler's wrist, she added with quiet certainty, "I'm trained to handle multiple opponents. And unlike your friend here, I actually know what I'm doing." There was no anger in her voice, just facts. And that, more than anything, made Jake hesitate. He took a step back. There was something in her tone, a self-assurance that didn't come from ego but from experience. This wasn't bluff. This was lived reality. Mason fidgeted behind him, unsure if he should step in or step away. His usual nervous energy had curdled into unease. This wasn't the game they usually played. Tyler's breathing had turned shallow now. Reality was catching up. For 18 years, his size, money, and connections had been enough. Enough to get away with anything. Enough to keep people in line. Enough to bend the rules. But none of that mattered now. Not here. Not with her. "Fine," he spat, his voice a mix of fury and humiliation. "You made your point," Tyler muttered through clenched teeth. "Let me go, and I'll sit down." Cassie studied his face for a moment, searching for any trace of deceit beneath the bruised ego. Finally, with deliberate control, she released his wrist and let her hand drop to her side. Tyler immediately stepped back, rubbing his arm where her fingers had been, eyes locked on hers, no longer arrogant, but calculating. "Thank you," Cassie said simply, her voice cool and composed. "Now, let's try this again. Everyone, please take your seats so we can begin today's lesson." The class obeyed instantly. Tyler slunk back to his usual seat in the corner, flanked by Jake and Mason, though now they looked less like a pack of enforcers and more like bodyguards who'd just seen their boss bleed for the first time. The room had changed. Students sat straighter. Phones were tucked away. Eyes faced forward. The chaos that had once defined B12 settled into a strange kind of order. But Cassie wasn't fooled. She saw it in Tyler's gaze, that quiet storm of humiliation and calculation. He wasn't finished. This wasn't over. He was already thinking about how to reclaim the control he'd lost. About how to turn the tables. Cassie's lesson that day was on conflict resolution in literature, a choice that now felt almost ironic. She moved through the material with clarity and focus, but she never stopped tracking the back corner. Tyler, Jake, Mason, their whispered comments, their cold stares, their restrained fury. They're planning something. Still, something unexpected happened. With Tyler momentarily neutralized, other voices in the room began to emerge. Timid at first, then stronger. Maria Santos, a quiet junior known more for her sketchbook than her speech, offered a moving interpretation of a poem about surviving adversity. David Chen, normally silent and withdrawn, made a thoughtful observation about how conflict doesn't just create tension, it reveals character. Even some of Tyler's usual satellites seemed different, relaxed, as if they, too, were breathing for the first time without fear of repercussions. But Tyler stayed quiet. His blue eyes never left Cassie, tracking her like a wolf measuring the distance to a threat. His silence wasn't surrender, it was strategy. The bell finally rang. Students spilled out into the halls, laughter and chaos flooding the corridors like a dam breaking. Tyler and his crew were the last to rise. They moved slowly, deliberately, letting everyone see that they weren't running. As he passed her desk, Tyler leaned in just enough for her to hear. "This isn't over," he whispered. Cassie didn't flinch. "I know," she replied softly. "But you might want to think carefully about what comes next." He held her gaze for one more beat, jaw tight, then walked out. When the last student was gone, Cassie sat down at her desk, the adrenaline slowly bleeding from her limbs. The classroom felt strangely still, like the aftermath of a storm. She'd revealed more of herself than she'd planned to. She hadn't come here to throw down challenges or dominate students. But Tyler's aggression had forced her to make a choice. Now, she had another. Retreat, and risk losing the respect she just earned, or prepare for the next move in a game that could get far more dangerous. Her phone buzzed. "Marcus, Tank, Williams. How's the new job treating you, champ?" Cassie smiled faintly. She typed back. "Cassie, might need to dust off some old skills. Remember what you taught me about handling multiple opponents?" Tank's reply came almost instantly. "Tank, stay calm. Trust your training. Best fighters win before the first punch is thrown. You got this." Cassie exhaled slowly, then began packing up for her next class. In the hallway, she could already hear Tyler's voice, confidently rewriting the story, casting himself as the victim, planting seeds for retaliation. By lunch, everyone at Lincoln Academy would know what had happened in B12. The only question was, what was Tyler going to do about it? The answer came sooner than Cassie expected. Midway through lunch, she received a summons, "Report to Principal Hayes' office immediately." Tyler had made his next move, and he hadn't gone through the school's disciplinary channels. He'd gone straight to the top, but not alone. When Cassie entered the administrative office, she found Councilman Robert Brennan, Tyler's father, already seated across from Principal Hayes. The atmosphere in the room was heavy, the air taut with rehearsed concern and unspoken threats. At 52, Robert Brennan carried the polish of a lifelong politician. Silver hair, a designer suit, and the well-practiced smile of a man used to getting his way. "Miss Blake," Principal Hayes said, her voice tight with strain, "Councilman Brennan has raised concerns about an incident that occurred in your classroom this morning." Cassie nodded once, staying composed. Robert Brennan stood as she entered, extending his hand with a politician's charm. "Miss Blake, I'm Tyler's father. I understand there was an altercation between you and my son." Cassie shook his hand, noting the firm grip designed to feel like control. She didn't flinch. "There was a classroom disruption," she said evenly. "I used appropriate techniques to manage the situation and prevent further escalation. Tyler was interfering with the learning environment." Robert's smile didn't fade, but the warmth in his eyes vanished. "Tyler tells me you physically restrained him, without cause. That's a serious claim, Miss Blake. One that opens the district to legal and reputational risk. Frankly, it's unacceptable." Principal Hayes shifted in her seat, visibly uncomfortable. Cassie could see the wheels turning, calculating whether one probationary teacher was worth standing up to the Brennan family's political muscle. Cassie didn't wait to be sacrificed. "I understand your concern, Councilman," she said calmly. "Which is why I suggest we review the security footage from this morning's class. Every room at Lincoln Academy is equipped with cameras, correct?" Robert's expression faltered. "Security footage?" "Yes," Cassie continued smoothly, lying with the grace of someone who'd learned to fight with words before fists. "I'm sure Principal Hayes can arrange for us to review it together. The footage will clearly show that I used minimal, non-harmful intervention to prevent Tyler from destroying school property." Principal Hayes blinked. The security system had been dysfunctional for years. But Cassie's composure, and the implied accountability, shifted the balance. "Of course," Hayes said slowly. "We can review any available footage before making any formal judgments." Robert Brennan hesitated. He smelled the trap, but to object was to imply his son might be lying. And that was political suicide. "I see," he said tightly. "Then I trust the review will be thorough." "Absolutely," Cassie replied. "Tyler is welcome back in my classroom when he's ready to participate constructively." The meeting ended in a tense standstill, polite words layered over thinly veiled hostility. Robert left first, his expression calm, but his jaw clenched in frustration. He wasn't used to being cornered. When the office door clicked shut behind him, Principal Hayes turned to Cassie with a raised brow. "I hope you know what you're doing," she said quietly. "The Brennan family doesn't lose. And if Tyler's version gains traction—" "I understand the politics," Cassie interrupted. "But I also understand this. Backing down to bullies, students or parents, only feeds the problem. Tyler needs to learn consequences. And his father needs to learn that influence doesn't erase accountability." Hayes regarded her for a moment, then nodded, the faintest trace of respect behind her eyes. As Cassie walked back to her classroom, she felt the weight of what she'd just done settle on her shoulders. She'd bluffed, bought time, and stepped into a much larger game. She wasn't just teaching English anymore. She was teaching a lesson in power, consequence, and the cost of silence. The real battle was just beginning. Cassie knew Tyler would be back, smarter this time, angrier, and with a bruised ego driving him toward something more dangerous. But for the first time since stepping into Lincoln Academy, she didn't feel like prey. She felt like purpose. 8 years of martial arts. A lifetime carved from Detroit's hardest corners. She hadn't come to this school just to teach syntax and symbolism. She'd come to stand for something. And if that meant walking into a storm, so be it. Tyler Brennan thought she was just another teacher to break. He had no idea what he'd awakened. By the time her last class let out, the halls buzzed with whispers. Word of what happened that morning had gone viral across the school's social networks. Faster than facts, louder than truth. To many students, seeing someone stand up to Tyler Brennan was like watching David draw blood from Goliath. Something they'd never dared to imagine. But just as the final bell rang and students poured toward buses and parent pickups, Cassie's phone buzzed with a message that made her blood turn to ice. "Parking lot. 5 minutes. Come alone if you want to keep this between us." No name. No emoji. No bluster. Just intent. Cassie didn't need confirmation. She knew exactly who had sent it. Tyler was done with mind games and political plays. He wanted a resolution. Off camera. Off record. Off the map. She could ignore it. Report it. Call the cops. But only one option offered a chance to end this, to stare it down and finish what had begun. She picked up her keys and headed for the door. Her breath calmed. Her focus narrowed. The lessons Marcus "Tank" Williams had drilled into her weren't just for trophies or sparring points. They were for moments like this. Moments when walking away wasn't an option. The October wind knifed across the nearly empty parking lot, its chill scraping along the cracked asphalt like a warning. Cassie stepped outside, eyes scanning the open space. Her Honda Civic sat alone in the faculty section. But she spotted it instantly. Tyler Brennan's black BMW parked in the far corner, half hidden behind the maintenance dumpsters. Jake Morrison's lifted truck. Mason Reeves' motorcycle. They'd chosen their ground well, just out of view from the security cameras. Classic bully playbook: isolate, control, ambush. Cassie walked with measured steps, her body loose, her mind calculating. Distances, timing, angles of escape. This wasn't a gym. No soft mats. No point system. This was real. Mistakes here would cost more than bruises. Tyler stepped out first. His designer jacket hung open, revealing the bulked-up frame that had cowed students and teachers alike. But Cassie didn't flinch. Jake and Mason flanked him, silent and ready, the kind of boys who'd never been told no with force. They stood like predators, convinced they still ruled the food chain. "I gotta admit, Miss Blake," Tyler called, his voice echoing, "you've got bigger balls than I thought." Most teachers would have run to Principal Hayes after a message like that. Cassie stopped, 15 feet out, close enough to hear, far enough to strike or retreat. Her voice was calm, measured. "What do you want, Tyler? If this is about this morning, we can take it to Hayes, discuss it like adults." Tyler's laugh was sharp, joyless. "Adults? Lady, you grabbed me. In front of everyone. You embarrassed me like I was some punk." His voice dipped low, venomous. "That doesn't get handled in an office. That gets handled right here." Jake cracked his knuckles. The sound echoed, hard and theatrical. "My dad always said, when someone disrespects you, you teach them not to try it again," Jake muttered. "Seems like our teacher needs to learn some respect." "She needs to learn her place," Mason added. Cassie looked at them, 3 boys who'd ruled a kingdom of fear. And for the first time, she didn't see power. She saw desperation. She saw weakness masked by numbers. She saw children pretending to be monsters. Mason bounced slightly on his toes, his nervous energy betraying the bravado in his voice. "Just because you know a few karate moves doesn't mean you can mess with us. This isn't some suburban dojo, sweetheart." Cassie didn't move. Her eyes tracked each of them, body still but mind calculating. Tyler was the biggest, strong, sure, but heavy-footed. A bully, not a brawler. Jake had a wrestler's stance, low, coiled, dangerous up close. Mason was unpredictable, twitchy, more likely to escalate than retreat. 3-on-1. But Cassie didn't feel outnumbered. She felt focused. "I'm going to give you one chance," she said, her voice calm but edged with steel. "Walk away. Go to your cars. Drive home. And we'll pretend this never happened. But if you take one more step toward me, everything changes." Tyler's face twisted, anger tightening his jaw. "You still think you're in control? Look around, teacher. 3 against 1. No cameras. No witnesses. By the time security finds you, we'll be long gone. And you'll be explaining to the hospital why you thought you could take on guys half your age." Cassie smiled faintly, the expression more dangerous than amused. "Half my age. Tyler, I'm 26. You're 18. Let's at least get the math right before you do something you'll regret." That line hit harder than a punch. Tyler had spent 2 years crafting his reputation. Fear, intimidation, power. To be corrected, not insulted, just calmly corrected, like a child getting a math problem wrong? That pierced deeper than any threat. "That's it," Tyler snapped, storming forward. "Time to teach Miss Karate a lesson." Jake and Mason moved too, instinctively spreading out, trying to flank her. Standard pack tactic. Control the space. Remove her options. Intimidate by positioning. But Cassie Blake wasn't a victim. She was a trained fighter. As Tyler came at her from the front and Jake crept left, Cassie's posture subtly shifted. Weight on the balls of her feet. Center of gravity lowered. Hands loose but ready. "Last warning," she said, voice low and sharp like a drawn blade. "Walk away." Tyler didn't. He surged forward, hand outstretched, fingers inches from her blazer. Cassie moved. Pivot. Hook. Lift. A perfect hip toss. Tyler's own momentum turned against him as 200 pounds of angry teenager sailed over her shoulder and slammed into the pavement. The sound was brutal. His designer jacket tore as he scraped across the asphalt, breath knocked from his lungs. For a beat, Jake and Mason just froze. They'd never seen anything like it. Holy, Mason breathed. Did she just? Jake's instincts kicked in before his brain could catch up. A double-leg takedown. Classic. Fast. Powerful. He'd won tournaments with it. But against Cassie's 8 years of Brazilian jiu-jitsu? It was a gift. Cassie sprawled backward, deflecting the takedown and catching Jake's neck as he lunged forward. Her right arm wrapped tight under his jaw, guillotine choke. She twisted her hips, locking in the submission as gravity did the rest. Jake hit the ground with her wrapped around him. The choke cut off blood flow, not enough to harm, just enough to black out. He thrashed once, then went still. Jake! Mason shouted, his voice cracking. Tyler groaned, trying to roll over, rage and disbelief all over his scraped-up face. Cassie stood slowly. No rush. No panic. Her breathing steady, her posture composed. 2 down. 1 to go. Mason screamed, finally jolting into action. Let him go. But Jake was already going limp, his struggles growing weaker as the choke did its work. Cassie maintained the hold for just a few more seconds, long enough to be effective, not dangerous, then released him and rolled away as his body slumped to the ground. Tyler staggered to his feet, rage and shame radiating from his flushed face. You're crazy. You could have killed him. He's fine, Cassie replied coolly, already back in position. He'll wake up in 30 seconds. With a headache and a bruised ego. Unlike what you 3 had planned for me. Mason looked down at Jake, then over at Tyler, his so-called leader. Doubt flickered across his face, unraveling the bravado that had brought him here. Tyler, man. Maybe we should just... Shut up. Tyler barked, cutting him off with a snarl. I don't care what kind of kung fu garbage she knows. She's still just one person. And I'm twice her size. He charged again, wild punches flying with the frantic desperation of someone whose illusion of power was crumbling. Cassie didn't flinch. She slipped the first punch, redirected the second with an open palm, stepped inside, and drove a brutal elbow straight into his solar plexus. The effect was instant. Tyler folded with a guttural grunt, knees slamming onto the cold asphalt as all the air left his lungs in a choking gasp. Cassie pivoted behind him and wrapped her arm around his neck in a rear naked choke, tight, controlled, and efficient. His body froze as the pressure hit. His hands clawed at her forearm, but Cassie's grip didn't budge. This can end right now, she whispered into his ear. All you have to do is say you're sorry, and promise to leave me, and every other teacher, alone. Or I put you to sleep like your friend. And let you wake up to 20 students recording you getting choked out by the woman you thought you could intimidate. Tyler's body jerked in panic, his hands scrabbling uselessly at her grip. His face turned red. His breathing grew ragged. I'm sorry, he gasped. I'm sorry, okay? Just let me go. Cassie didn't loosen her hold. Sorry for what, Tyler? Be specific. For being a jerk in class, for threatening you, for bringing you out here. His voice was desperate now, each word broken by labored breaths. Please, I can't breathe. Cassie kept the pressure steady. And what about tomorrow? Do you go back to terrorizing the school? Bullying teachers? Harassing students? No, I swear. I'll stop. I'll be good in class, whatever you want. Just please. His voice cracked, less from oxygen deprivation now, and more from something new. Fear. Real, humbled fear. Mason stood frozen a few feet away, his phone still raised. But instead of calling for help, he'd hit record. Not out of cruelty, but out of shock. Awe. He was witnessing a turning point in real time. Something Lincoln Academy had never seen before. Cassie held the choke for 2 more seconds, then released. Tyler collapsed forward onto all fours, coughing and gasping. His hands cradled his throat, his expression dazed, like someone who'd just survived a car crash. Jake stirred beside him, groaning as he slowly regained consciousness. Mason moved to help his friend sit up, but his eyes never left Cassie. They all looked at her differently now. Not like a teacher. Not like a woman. Like a force of nature they'd foolishly tried to challenge, and barely survived. Cassie stood tall. "Here's what's going to happen," she said, her voice cutting through the wind like a judge handing down a sentence. "You're going to get in your cars and go home. Tomorrow, you're going to come to class. You're going to sit quietly, take notes, and treat me, and every other teacher, with respect. You're going to stop harassing students. You're going to grow up." Tyler looked up at her, broken and furious, his designer jacket torn, his pride scattered across the asphalt. "You can't tell us what to do. My father." "Your father isn't here," Cassie snapped, eyes locked on his. "And if you think Councilman Brennan wants a video of his son getting choked out by a woman half his size going viral, then you're even dumber than your grades suggest." She nodded toward Mason's phone. "How many followers do you have on Instagram, Mason?" "Because I guarantee this video will get more views than anything you've ever posted." Mason looked down at his phone in stunned silence. He had documented every second of their total humiliation, and now he held the power to end their reputations forever. And suddenly, all 3 of them knew it. I wasn't going to post it," Mason stammered, his grip tightening on the phone. "You were just recording evidence," Cassie cut in smoothly, stepping forward, "of 3 male students attempting to assault a female teacher in a school parking lot." Her voice was calm, deadly calm. "That's probably a felony in this state. So here's my offer. Delete the video. Convince your friends to act like civilized human beings. And we pretend this never happened. Or—" Her eyes hardened. "You keep it. Show it around. And then explain to the police how you planned an ambush and assault on school property." The silence that followed was deafening. The 3 boys exchanged glances. The illusion of control, of being the hunters, was gone. Reality settled around them like a noose. They had come expecting to intimidate and maybe hurt a teacher they assumed was soft. Instead, they'd been dismantled, methodically, brutally, legally, by a woman who'd spent 8 years preparing for this exact scenario. Tyler slowly pulled himself to his feet, movements stiff, every breath a reminder of the lesson he'd just been taught. "This isn't over," he muttered. But the words were hollow, stripped of threat. Cassie stepped closer. Tyler flinched without thinking. "Oh, it's over," she said softly, her voice the sharp edge of steel. "Because if you ever threaten me, or any teacher, again, if you touch another student, if you even look at someone the wrong way in my classroom—" She leaned in slightly, her tone deadly sincere. "I'll make what just happened here feel like a gentle hug. Do you understand me?" Tyler didn't speak. He just nodded, quickly, eyes lowered like a scolded child. Jake and Mason helped him toward his BMW, the swagger gone from their steps, replaced by the slow, shamed gait of those who'd learned what defeat truly tasted like. As they reached the cars, Cassie raised her voice one final time. "Oh, and Tyler?" He paused, turning halfway, eyes wary. "If your father wants to discuss this situation, tell him I'd be more than happy to meet with him and Principal Hayes. I'm sure he'd love to hear all about his son's extracurricular activities." None of them responded. They got in the car and drove off. No music, no laughter, no words. Just silence. Cassie stood alone in the parking lot, the setting sun casting long golden shadows across the pavement. Her breathing was steady, her posture relaxed. Calm after the storm. She walked to her battered Honda Civic, unlocked the door, and slid into the seat. Her phone buzzed. "Marcus, Tank, Williams. How'd the first day go, champ?" Cassie smiled faintly, thumbs flying across the screen. Cassie had to remind some students about respect. Nothing I couldn't handle. The reply came almost instantly. Tank. That's my girl. Remember, the real victory isn't winning the fight. It's preventing the next one. Cassie stared at that message for a long moment, then dropped her phone into the cup holder and started the engine. As she drove through the quiet suburbs of Denver, she reflected on everything that had just happened. She hadn't wanted violence. She hadn't come to Lincoln Alternative Academy to fight. She'd come to teach, to reach troubled kids, to help them grow. But sometimes, the lessons that mattered most weren't in a textbook. Sometimes, the only way to teach respect was to demand it. The next morning, Lincoln Academy was buzzing before the first bell. Tyler Brennan walked into Cassie's classroom early. He sat in the front row, opened his notebook, raised his hand, participated thoughtfully in a discussion about conflict resolution in Lord of the Flies. Jake and Mason sat on either side of him, equally quiet, equally respectful. The entire class noticed. The three most feared boys in school, who once ruled through intimidation, were now model students. Overnight, rumors spread like wildfire. Some claimed Cassie had caught them with drugs. Others whispered she'd called their powerful parents. A few swore she'd threatened to expel them. No one guessed the truth, because the truth was simpler and more powerful. They had learned that actions have consequences, and that some people, no matter how calm or kind they look, can't be intimidated. No matter how rich you are, no matter who your father is. Principal Hayes noticed the shift too. She stopped by Cassie's classroom during lunch, her expression a mix of disbelief and admiration. "Miss Blake," she said, "I don't know what you did, but Tyler Brennan actually thanked me this morning for hiring you. In 15 years, I've never seen such a complete turnaround." Cassie simply smiled. She didn't offer details, didn't explain what had really happened. Sometimes, students just need to understand that some adults won't back down, especially when it matters most. By the end of the week, word had spread beyond the halls of Lincoln Academy. Throughout the entire school district, people were talking. A school once dismissed as a dumping ground for the unfixable was undergoing a transformation. Students felt safer. Teachers stood taller. Even the most hardened kids began rethinking how they treated others. Tyler Brennan never spoke of what happened in that parking lot, but his actions told the story. He started tutoring younger students, joined the school's conflict resolution club, and, in a twist no one could have predicted, convinced his powerful father to fund an anti-bullying initiative for the entire district. It wasn't about fear anymore. It was about respect, earned, not demanded. Because sometimes the most powerful lessons don't come from textbooks or lectures. They come from standing your ground. From reminding others that strength without wisdom is hollow. That true authority doesn't shout, it shows. Cassie Blake came to Lincoln Alternative Academy as just another substitute teacher. But she left as a legend. The woman who didn't just teach English. She taught what real strength looks like. And in classroom B12, long after the echoes of that first week faded, students kept learning. They learned that the most important battles aren't fought with fists or fear, but with courage, conviction, and the quiet belief that everyone deserves respect. Even those who've forgotten how to give it. Outro, narration style, or caption. Have you ever seen someone get the reality check they desperately needed? Sometimes, the universe delivers justice in the most unexpected packages. Drop your thoughts below. Because we all love stories where the underdog reminds the world what real strength truly looks like.